Hey guys, this is Voxide, and I want to share with you guys a script that I've created that makes creating parallax compositions just a little bit more easy. And to create a parallax composition, basically what you would do is, let's create a new composition here. So what you would normally do is make the layer 3D, and then you would create a circle composition. Then you would duplicate the layer, go to your mask, increase the mask, and then duplicate the mask, set this to subtract, and sort of fill in the gaps here and duplicate the mask again, grab these masks and increase the scale here, and let's create another one. Alright, so you can kind of see how the process would go. And it's not even that good, but whatever. So achieving a manual parallax, you can see that it gets tedious really fast. And then you would have to, let's create a new camera first actually. And 90 degrees, that's good. And you would basically push all of these layers in Z space. So if I go to my custom view, I can press P for position, and I will start pushing these layers in Z. Alright, and try your best to sort of keep an even distance between these layers. And then if you go back to your active camera, now you would have to scale all of these layers and sort of fill in the gaps here. So scale this layer, right, so you end up with an effect that looks something like this. And you can see that it's not even that great. So you can spend a lot of time and try to adjust all of these things manually. And what the script does is, let's create a new scene here. So I'll go to my scripts, run script, and simply double click, and you would get this window over here. And with the layer selected, I will hit parallax, and these are the default settings that work with a layer that's full HD. Alright, so hit parallax, and let's hit escape here. And you can see that there's a bunch of layers here, and the last layer here, so layer 21 in this case, is the original layer that's unaltered in any way. So I'll just go ahead and actually just hide this layer. This is just a backup layer basically. And now if I add a layer, let's add a new camera, and usually for parallax I like using an angle of view of 90 degrees. The default value here should be 45, so just make sure that this is set to 90. Hit OK. And if I zoom in now, you can see that the parallax is generated. Alright, and if I go to, let's say, custom view, you can kind of understand what's happening here. So we got all of these layers, and the offset is automatic. So all of these layers are each pushed incrementally in Z space and also incrementally scaled. And all of this is nice and organized, and it's done in one click. So hopefully I build a script to save some time for myself when creating parallax effects, so hopefully it will save you some time as well. So back to my active camera view. Now I can create whatever kind of effects I want, and let's just create a simple camera pen animation, and I'll add a null object and make this a 3D layer and parent my camera to the null object. Press P for position. Let's right click and choose separate dimensions, and let's move this a little bit. Alright, so maybe make a keyframe around this point, and go to frame 75, and let's add another keyframe here. You can see that there's some slight gap between these layers, and that's fine. I will show you how to change the settings later and get rid of these borders. Alright, so this is the animation. And let's readjust this timeline, and let's also add a text layer. Let's see, what the hell did I write? Parallax. Alright, and make this a 3D layer. So by default this will be in the 4 plane. And if I go to the position here and just push this in space, Alright, so make sure that this is sort of like in the center of the scene here, and then just press S for scale and scale this back up. And I can add a glow to this. And maybe reposition this a bit. And let's make a quick RAM preview and see what we got. Alright, so pretty good, very nice and very simple, and you can go ahead and play around with the camera. And basically what you do from here is completely up to you. Let's now talk a little bit about all of these settings that we got here. So I'll create a new composition and let's run the script again. And I'll set the depth and scale here to 0, and the depth and scale are basically how much the layers are offset in Z space. So if I set this value to 100, that's pretty much how far your layers will be offset in Z space. And if I set the scale to 100 here, that's how much the layer scale will be offsetted by. And these two values pretty much go hand in hand, but I wanted to give you individual control over both the depth and the scale. But pretty much if you choose a value 50 for your depth, then scale should also be 50. But you can experiment with these values and see how different values work. But usually, yes, they will be kind of the same. And a default value of 100 for both of these works really well in most cases. But to explain these other settings, I will actually set these values to 0, both of them. So I don't want the layers to be offset at all as I explain these other settings. So if I just hit Parallax with 0 and 0 for depth and scale, and go to the last layer here and disable it, you can see that the effect that we get is simply we've created a mask, a bunch of circle masks that complete the whole image. So if I solo these layers one by one, you can kind of see the story here. Alright, and let's reset the scene. So the first value here is size, and this is pretty much the radius of the circle. So if I increase this to 100 and hit Parallax, now as I solo these layers, you can see that they're twice as big as previous. And you can see that there's a thin border around them, and that's because the expansion is set to 50. And let's talk a bit about expansion. So if I grab one of these layers and tap M twice to show my mask settings, you can see that the mask expansion is both set to 50 and -50. And together these settings will sort of cover an area of 100 pixels. And we just need to set these settings to 51 and -51. Just so it covers this thin white layer here, and let's set this quality to full. Alright, so previously it was 50 and -50. And this just leaves this 1 pixel width of border here, and to fix this we just increase this by 1 pixel. So as a general rule, your expansion value should be half your size value plus 1. Alright, so if this is 200, expansion is 100 plus 1, it's 101. So in this case, it's going to be 51. So that's expansion. Feather is pretty self-explanatory. It just adds a feather to each mask. So if you want to use a feather value, you will also need to increase the expansion. And let's actually just reset the scene here and see what we're talking about. Alright, so this is my original layer. So let's add a value of 50 for feather, hit Parallax, and disable the first layer here, the last layer actually. So now you can see that each of these layers has a mask applied, feather applied to the mask rather. So if I press F for feather, you can see that there's a value of 50. And to offset this feather effect, you will need to increase the expansion. So you also have the option to have feather for your masks, for your layers, and this will ensure that it creates a nice smooth effect and you don't have any creeping at all. So now the iterations are how many of these circles will be applied, and like I said earlier, this depends on the size of your image. So for full HD, a value of 22 should be fine. And let's reset the settings here. So actually, because I'm using a value, the default value for the mask here is 50, but because I'm using a larger value of 100, I will only need half this value until the whole screen is covered by the masks. So this will mean a value of 11. Alright, and expansion will be 51, and if I hit parallax and disable this layer, you can see that we still have these dark edges, so maybe we needed 12 iterations, but hopefully you get the point. And let's reset the scene again. And now basically the depth and scale will be just how far the layers are offset. So usually a value of 100 for both of these values should work really fine, and hit parallax. Alright, disable the first layer, add a camera, 90 degrees angle, and this is looking pretty good. And you can see actually to fix these borders, all we have to do is just increase the expansion. And let's reset the scene again, or actually let's just keep the camera and delete all of these layers, grab our initial layer and just maybe increase the expansion to 75, hit parallax, disable the layer. Alright, and now we have no dark spaces between the masks. Alright, so this might be a little complicated, but hopefully this makes sense. I'm sure that if you play around with these settings and experiment with them, you'll eventually get it. And I built this script for myself to save time when creating these parallax compositions, and I really hope that it saves you time as well. Guys, thanks for watching. If you're looking for high quality After Effects templates, I definitely recommend visiting my store and see if there's something you like. Link is in the description.